A very good morning to you. I'm Howard Feldman. I'm head of marketing and people at Synthesis Software Technologies. And we speak, as you know, on our podcast to various people in the industry, people outside of our industry, where we like to get a different perspective. And why is that? Is because Synthesis has a very different perspective of life. We don't walk necessarily the same walk as everybody else does. We think out the box, we are agile, we're different, and certainly we don't like to be confined to everything or by everything that we have been told in the past. Which makes our guest today particularly interesting and particularly apt. Phumlani Majozi is certainly well known to me. I've spoken to him a number of times on my morning show on Chai FM, and he's always got an interesting opinion. He's very active on Twitter. He's not afraid to voice his opinion, even though more often than not, I see that he gets bashed around from time to time. Good morning.
Morning, Howard. How are you doing? I'm good. Great to be here. I just like the intro you've just made there. Being bashed. I don't know for what. I mean, why are people so afraid to hear other people's views? Why are we so intolerant? But I guess we now will talk about that. But that's what I face often. Being called names, being portrayed as somebody who doesn't care about the poor, who doesn't care about, South Africa's history, and so on and so on, which is quite sad, because my positions and what I strive for is the betterment of people in South Africa, especially the poor, right? And what I talk about.
Right. Well, that makes it so interesting, because I would imagine that if you got together with some of the people that object to what you say, and you have to define what you would love in a society and what they would love in a society, you probably get to the same point. So it's quite interesting what I would imagine that you would, but it's how you get there that where you differ. And that makes it very, very difficult, and even more difficult to understand, because if we all have to get to Cape Town, and I think it's better to go by plane, and you think it's better to go by the Trans-Karoo, if that still exists, what's the difference? As long, and we can debate what's better from various angles. One might be better for the environment. The other one might be more timeous. The other one could be more expensive. The other one, I could take more luggage with me. There are different ways of getting there. But ultimately, we all want to get to Cape Town. And I just find it so interesting.
Yes, it's very interesting. I think that has to do, the fact that we all want to create a better society, no doubt, right? And as I've just mentioned now, the differences are around how do we get there, right? And I think what makes things worse in terms of the divisions is the fact that the other side thinks that my approach is more exploitation. I don't care about the poor. My approach is not going to work because it keeps people repressed. So they don't believe that what I believe should be done works for the society. So they don't believe that, right? And then on the other side, which is my side, I'm saying as well, your ideas have failed and are failing us already in South Africa. Why do you want us to push through with them? Why should we continue, right? And then as a result, there is this sort of push, from different, positions. So it's kind of, but I think we can't think the same way, Howard, right? I don't expect people to agree with me in everything, right? I expect some people to disagree with me.
Well, I'm sure you hope that
to an extent,
because that's discussion, that's debate, that is what's important.
I'm open for a debate. What I'm looking for is an engagement, to put forward in South Africa. I thought that, not everything. We can't say, okay, let's just accept the national health insurance, right? Let's just accept it as politicians propose to us. Let's look at the pros and cons, right? BEE, the policy, right? Let's look at where are we failing, where are we getting it right, and what's wrong with it. Let's not just accept it and say, because the intention is good, right? So my point is that we need to open up a discussion and a debate, right? And I'm open to that, and that's what I always try and sort of look for when I engage people. But it's said that in some instances, even some of my friends have basically said, you know what, you are speaking nonsense, we reject you. And you know, I've lost some good friends. Reason being, and can I tell you one thing? I didn't lose them after the discussion we sat down. I lost them before the discussion. I proposed it, how about we meet for coffee to discuss this thing? I was told, no, you are a house Negro, you are a sellout, you are, and all kind of names. That meeting over coffee
it's name calling again.
It's name calling
right,
again.
It's a coconut.
Without even, not even after the discussion, right? The discussion never even took place. There's no tolerance for the discussion, right? That doesn't have, reason being, you are not even supposed to be spoken to. Your nonsense doesn't have to be listened to. There's no point to talk to you, right?
In other words, you discredit the person before. Well, it was actually interesting because I had something quite similar where well, a couple of years ago, I was doing a lot of work around in the workplace and helping specifically women in the workplace and how to establish some form of power and how to look at these, especially in leadership. And I wrote an article about it, which I sent to one of the publications, and they said they really like it. They agree with everything that I'm saying, but they're not going to publish an article by a white male dealing with with solutions and ideas around Black women in the workplace. And I thought that it blew me away. I mean, I shouldn't be surprised at it because we have defined our country along color lines and race identity politics has become everything. But I was absolutely amazed that they said to me, we like the article, we agree with it, we think these are great solutions, but it can't come from a white male. And it's just really does say something quite sad.
It does say something quite sad. I never read your article, but I'm quite sure you were not anti-women, right? You don't look like a gentleman who would say women must
No, it was quite. No, it was quite the opposite. It was actually it engaged in very different a different way of looking at it. So, for example, one of the women that I spoke to, and it was all came about through body language training and things like that. Yeah. And a Black woman said to me, the problem is that culturally she has been brought up not to look at a person or a man necessarily in the eye, but now she comes across as mistrustful. So how does she deal with that? And we had a whole debate around that. Should she leave her cultural references at the door of the boardroom, or should she say, excuse me for not, looking at you? It's, how do we deal with that? And these were very, very pertinent issues that people are dealing with in the workplace. A Muslim woman can't, a religious Muslim woman can't shake a man's hand. So what does she do about that? How does she address it? Okay, this is pre-COVID. Now at least no one shakes anyone's hand.
Yeah.
But these are the types of issues, and I broke them down and to look at ways of handling them. So it certainly was the whole idea of the article was to try and provide some context, obviously to both men and women, why some of these issues take place in the workplace. And it was not an article. It was published on News 24. It was fine. But a couple of the other places, and actually one other place, said, no, absolutely not. This is not going to come from a white male.
And the reason is because you are a white male, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's been, by the way, that has been one of the things I've noticed in South Africa for some time now, where because of your specific race or culture, right? Or basically color, your race. You can't say certain things, yet some people, can, right? I tweeted the other day something that got a lot of sort of engagement. I was saying that, to be frank, in my observation, you tend to find that Black politicians, they say anything about minorities in South Africa, right? Including going as far as threatening violence, some that is very, very offensive, right? And guess what? The people who say that they doubled their support in the recent elections, right? So they get a pass, right? So I'm trying to say there is this tendency and when we are white and you say something, I have a white friend of mine who tweeted something, and because he said it, in fact, he was talking about the issue of entitlement in his observation of what entitlement is. And because of that, he lost his career. He was thrown under the bus by even his boss. It was terrible, right? So I'm trying to say the fact that we tend to judge, we don't listen to what people are saying. What is their point, right? We rather look at the color of their skin and disqualify them based on that. When in fact they're raising very critical, questions and comments.
Which is why you're a problem. Which is why you're a problem. So if a white person were to tweet and say some of the things you were saying, then we could discredit them because of their race. If you say it, you become more of a problem, because how do we discredit you?
Well, the right words to discredit me is to say things like as I said, a house Negro, a sellout, or whatever, right? And if you're a white person and you say the things that I say, you're going to be called a white supremacist.
Right.
You're out of touch with reality. You are protecting your white privilege. You will go on and go on. So there are always, if you're white, there are specific names for you, right? If you are black, there are specific names for you that will be used to discredit, not just what based on your race. Yeah.
So that's the challenge of discourse. But let's get into just some of the issues. We all do want the same thing. We want to create a society in South Africa that is successful for everybody, that all of our children and our families can live in prosperity, that there's no issue of racism. We want to create that type of an environment. Obviously, it's realistic to some level, but not on all levels, because we are human and we are flawed. We are imperfect. That's just how it is. The government, since 1994, introduced BEE, affirmative action. Truthfully, I have been very supportive of that until it's failed. We can see that it's failed in its either implementation or its success. The diversity within companies and corporates is obviously something that we should be striving for, but it is very, very difficult to achieve with the in terms of the South African law and the South African structures. If you had to be the one to make the decision as to how we could achieve a non-racial, prosperous society, so you've got carte blanche, what would you do?
Sure. So we want to achieve a non-racial society, right? We are looking for diversity, right? And we want diversity of race, because you can see that, well, when you look at, I'll give you for example, when you look at the private sector, according to the Employment Equity Report, I think the last one was at least plus minus 70% of the private sector. It's the management there, the top management, it's white people, right? Compared to the public sector, where you have at least 70% of the management being black, right? So there's much talk in South Africa around the issue of, there's much complaints that transformation is quite slow in the private sector, because more white people, or at least it's still largely controlled by white people. So for me, my view with that is, the main thing is we need to understand, it's very important to factor in our history, right? You can't discuss South Africa without looking at its 100%. History. For sure, you can't do that. So we understand that, okay, and firstly, we need to do not forget what was our starting point. Our starting point is our democratic year, when we became a democracy, right, in 1994. In 1994 already, when you look at it as a starting point, you were already in a position where, according to many metrics, right, Black people were already left behind, right, compared to other racial groups,
Right.
whites.
The 1994 is not a zero-sum game. It's already started off
Exactly.
with tremendous imbalance. Sure.
Tremendous imbalances that were in place at the time. So the question is, okay, so how do we don't want to pull those who are already ahead down, right? We don't want to do that. We want to move those who are already at the bottom up, right? It could be in terms of income. It could be in terms of in terms of education. It could be in terms of business control or business ownership. You could go on and on about the metrics you want to use, right? You want to move those at the bottom up, right? So what you do, so firstly, you need to come up with a plan, right? And your plan must be focused on things like, okay, we do it when you look at the stats from statistics from data from Statistics South Africa. Mm-hmm. You do find that as you move from without education to primary education to secondary education to tertiary education, income there rises up, right? So if you have no matric, you are likely to be unemployed, mm-hmm. and also your income would be quite very low, right? Compared to someone who has a tertiary education, right? So given the fact that you want to sort of push blacks up, right? So how do we reform your education, right? To make sure that you give, especially blacks, the education that can enable them to rise through the ladder, mm-hmm. right? I think that's very, very fundamental. Right, 100%. Because if you want to have managers at investment banking firms, right?
Yeah, but people need the training.
Whatever companies. Mm-hmm. Yes, they will need to have the experience and the skills and the education to be there, right? So if you want to, yes, we understand that the private sector is sort of dominated by the whites or the white culture, but that's going to take time. You need to have a plan, and you need to be able to upskill your people, be able to create an environment where people can thrive and rise up. And remember also, we also need to also have the thinking that at the same time, educate your people enough so that they're able to start investment firms, not spaza shops, investment firms, banks, different kind of service companies, right? That are sort of right at the high level, not just small businesses. So you've got to have a plan, and you need to, as government, you need to put in the mechanisms that will enable those who are left behind to rise higher and higher, right? And I think our government is getting it the obsession in South Africa becomes, okay, so how do we pull those who are already at the top down? And I see that a lot. That tax the white middle class more, so that it compensates for
instead of
to
people up, we pull people down. Is that what you're saying?
Of redistributive kind of policies that we hear about a lot. There's even a talk of wealth tax right now to try, and because government is indebted, it has mismanaged finances. So there is so much that's we need to be honest with our history, that we didn't start at the same. There were a lot of imbalances, and to try and change that, you have to lift those at the bottom with the right policies. But the right policies shouldn't be the policies that make those who are already at the top to pack their bags and go. You don't want that. You want them to stay in the country. You want them to become productive citizens. And you don't want to issue threats to them that if you don't have five top managers who are black or if you don't have 50% of your managers being black in your firm, we are therefore going to fine you, right? But you need to understand that companies themselves, if given the competition we face as a company, I would look for people who are skilled, people who will make sure that they will move my company forward, people who are experienced. And the moment you reach into sophisticated fields in South Africa, you find that very few blacks are represented in that space, right? So a company struggles now. Where do I find the best black person to do this?
And I think this is fairly common, that a lot of companies that I speak to are saying, we need to we want to improve our diversity. We have the full intention of doing it, but unfortunately we're not finding the candidates. So there's almost a reciprocal responsibility of government to say, we want you to do that, and we're demanding that we do it if that's the case. But then we're going to provide you. We're going to make sure that there are the candidates and that education is provided.
Education, training, you can call it as well. Skills development, quite critical. You need to do the groundwork, right?
Yeah.
Because you can't fail to do groundwork and then expect a result where we are going to have sort of, 70% of investment managers being black, when in fact we didn't do over the past 20 years or so of our democracy, in fact about 25, when we didn't do the groundwork, right? And also we need to one of the things that we need to understand, Howard, is that when you look at South Africa, I'm talking about corporates, right? Because I've worked in corporates for some time. You find that at an operational level, right, there tends to be diversity, right? Operational level, just, people who are doing the actual work. But as you change, rising up higher and higher, right, you tend that racial diversity disappears. But there's something people overlook as you rise up that hierarchy, right, from operational to mid-level to high level. The age also changes, right? You find that as you rise up, and you tend to find people now, it's people who are 40-something, people who are 50-something, as you rise up higher.
Right. I didn't think of that, and that's when we starting to view again the South Africa's history.
Exactly. So imagine the point, and by the way, a white person who started work in 1994, right, is based, and let's say we usually start our work around when we are 20, right? So already that person, or 20 or 21 or so, that person is around mid-40s, right? So I mean, already they're at a high level in terms of when talk about management.
Right.
And usually, and usually, the moment you hit the sort of the medium level as you go up higher, that's where you start seeing people from their 40s, right? Sort of 45 to 50 or so. And if it's this field we are talking about, the fields that we are talking about, it's going to be largely the white people because of the structure, right? Wow. And we forget to factor in that, which I think is missing. And I think the obsession is we tend to deal with what we see with the naked eye. Oh my gosh, they are there's more white people here and then there's less black people here. And we forget to think about the other factors that are in place or that have been in place over the past basically 25 years of our democracy. Yeah.
So what is the solution then? What do companies do if they are focused on diversity, inclusion, and want to achieve these goals?
Well, for companies, companies need to state their vision, right? They need to state their vision that actually we would love to have, if our company is largely white represented, we would love to have, other cultures, right? Not only blacks, Indians and colors and so on. Yeah, would love to see that. But I think on top of that, they need to make a case to government to express that you need to focus. You need to get skills development right. Because for us as a company, I don't want to hire Phumlani because he's black, right? I'm looking for Phumlani who is competent in what he's doing, right? Phumlani who has experience, Phumlani who is well-spoken, Phumlani who is XYZ, right? And we struggle to find those candidates, those people, right? So do your work as government. And I think for companies to band together and say, my view is that our companies tend to, though people disagree with me on this, they tend to, in many cases, just accept what government says, right? They don't want to say, well, we think here you are wrong, right? Rather do this if you want to see this in our companies. right?
Yes, but you see that it goes back to that original discussion. It is very hard for, if I were to say to the government, I'm sorry, I think you're wrong on your BEE strategy, they're going to say, of course you think I'm wrong because you're white, and the assumption will be that I've got different goals. Even though I don't have different goals, I've got exactly the same goal.
And that's another sad thing, by the way, that and I've seen this a lot, because I tend to interact with people of various races, including whites as well. And many of the whites I interact with, it could be friends, it could be people I work with, they tend to hold back on expressing their views as to what they think about the state of our government and politics, right? And of course, I mean, basically the state of politics, they tend to hold back on that because, I mean, the moment they criticize, and I do get messages on Twitter as well around this, people saying, Phumlani, we like what, well, you know, I'm white, I can't say what you're saying because I'll be looked as X, Y, Z. So there tends to be a hold back, as you've just mentioned, that people, because these companies are largely white, if they come and say, well, we think you are wrong as government. Well, these guys in government are just going to dismiss them because you are trying to protect your white privilege or whatever, right? So that's another challenge that we face. So for me, I think there has to be, what I'm trying to do on Twitter and wherever, as I try and engage the public, I think I'm trying to make an impact in terms of trying to shape the climate opinion, Howard. Because I think the climate opinion is very much, it's a climate that, as we mentioned earlier, it just discredits you because of your race, because of where you come from. There is intolerance around some of the issues we face as a country. There are things that we avoid talking about. So we need to change the way people think in general. And these are people who could be the general public. The media needs to know that there are different ideas there. The media needs to know that when the Democratic Alliance rejected race-based policies, it's really not that they don't care about addressing the needs of the poor in South Africa, but they are proposing a different alternative that could work, right? That could be more effective, at least in their view, than race-based policies, right? At least the alternative, it needs to be exposed. What I saw in the media was that there was just all attacks towards what the DA is trying to. There was no sort of explaining, right? So it has to be the media, it has to be the public as well, our politicians.
Because we don't have real debate. We're debating in
look at the US. Look at the US. Yeah. Just look at the US. You know, you have, even in the media, you have specific sort of news networks that you could call liberal in the US political thinking. You have those that you can call conservative, right? Or conservative, right? So, I mean, we don't have that kind of, so that issues are discussed, right? And they are put on the table. And issues of diversity in boardrooms, issues of education, issues of government service delivery. There have to be different perspectives on the table, but rather there's almost always one view. And that, I think, there's a space to play them. There's a sort of an opportunity to try and tell people that, no, there's a different way of thinking. If a white person from a private sector says, government, you are failing us in your policies, it's not because that person is trying to protect their interests.
Well, it might be, but that just needs to be interrogated, surely.
Yeah, well, anything can. Yeah.
It doesn't mean that, I think the assumption here is that I made is that we all want the same thing. But the reality, unfortunately, is maybe not all of us do want the same thing.
But
maybe, but I think the conversation that we're having is about people that honestly do, but have a different way of, as I said earlier, getting to Cape Town. So the question is how we do that.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a great deal of space in South Africa for us to try and push, sometimes the unpopular narratives out there.
Are you
So
ever
that people,
worried about it? I mean, are you ever nervous about putting your view forward?
sometimes I think two, three times, should I post this? Should I not? Should I say this? Shouldn't I say it? I do, because sometimes I get scary messages, right? Someone the other day, just a few months ago, wished death to my family or something like that. I got scared, Howard. I'm telling you. Like, I was like, I got nervous. With all that, with COVID-19 that's going on and all things that are happening left and right. And also I do have at home, my mom lives with a pre-existing condition. I was a bit scared, just made me nervous. And you begin to question yourself, what did I say that could offend someone
so
like
angry?
me?
But I think a lot of it we have to distinguish with what is about that and what is about them, really. Anyone who's threatening violence to somebody that voiced a rational opinion about something, I think I would be quite confident in saying the problem is theirs, not yours. But it doesn't mean that the impact on you is insignificant. So where to? Phumlani, where to from here? Any interest in getting involved with politics? I know you've been approached. I know lots of people think you should.
Yeah.
Would you consider it seriously?
Over the long term, I could consider it. I think for now, it's a matter of sort of being one of the voices in South Africa, right? Through social networks, through occasionally writing something and publishing it in a specific newspaper or news outlet. I think for me, for now, I think we need to shape the way people think. I will continue to post whatever I can post. I will continue to cause trouble. I think you said I'm a troublemaker on Twitter or something like that. I will continue to cause trouble.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it's important to get people to talk about issues that we tend to shy away from. Yeah.
Absolutely right. Phumlani Majozi, thank you for your time. Thank you for speaking to us. These conversations are absolutely vital. They are sometimes uncomfortable, but they need to be had. As long as we establish that we all want the same thing, we all want to get from Joburg to Cape Town. There are different ways to do it. Let's be a little bit more tolerant of the different styles and the different methods and ideas that people might have to achieve the same goals. I'm Howard Feldman. This is your Synthesis Podcast.